The Wespenra Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The Second Level of Learning. http://wespenry.com. Humanity's Future, Paper Number 3. Life After the Nano Second, Part 3. The New Mind. By Wespenra, Saturday, November 3, 2012. http://wespenry.com, Part 2. 3.1 Menopause. In today's world, many women are sad when they enter menopause. They think they are less attractive as women and as sexual beings. It reminds them that they are aging, and their ability to have children disappears as the menopause progresses. Even if the woman is not planning on having more children, she may feel the loss, thinking that the main ability of being a woman is gone. Interestingly enough, all these emotions connected with menopause are created by the patriarchal regime. Then men of power want the women young and full of estrogen and sexual energy to please them, for one, but mainly to use the women for more sinister purposes, as we know. It is true, that after menopause, the woman can no longer share her menstrual blood with her lover, but she is now entering another phase in her development as a divine female being, and the ancients knew this. A few hundred years ago, when a woman stopped her menses, it was believed that she was to be feared, because she could hold the blood and keep all the power to herself. In reality, when a woman goes through this period of less and less menses, or a longer period of time between them, albeit, it's not uncommon that women bleed more during menopause than they did before, she literally experiences a pause. If she is aware of this, and doesn't feel guilt, shame, or sadness during this time period, she is actually transforming something inside, and she is landing in a place of more wisdom. Instead of absorbing this wisdom, most women are taught that they are less attractive and are getting closer to death, and they learn to hate and curse their bodies, and in other, perhaps less extreme ways, learn to dislike their vessels. This puts the body off balance, and it can react in the most unpredictable ways, which then is being falsely connected to menopause. Other women, who may not feel these negative emotions and instead continue loving their body, don't have any particular problems during menopause. I know women, my mother included, who had their menses as usual, and one day they just stop. They didn't feel anything unusual with their bodies during the whole menopause. Now, I'm not saying that all women who have problems during menopause hate their bodies, but I am suggesting that if women washed away all these patriarchal ideas added to the menopause process, women in general would be able to go through the experience as something quite positive. 3.2 Blood, and menstrual blood in particular, as the genetic code. Our thoughts are recorded by our blood. They are imprinted together with our feelings and radiated outwards for everyone who wants to read. We are the sum of ourselves in the physical form because of our blood. This is why having a blood transfusion is a very critical thing to do, and this is also the reason why certain religious groups refuse to have one, and prefer to die. They even let their children die rather than having them go through a transfusion. What happens when we get someone else's blood in our veins is that we also adopt that person's personality, emotions, and memories to a larger or lesser degree, i.e. our personality may change afterwards. These same religious groups believe that their personality, and the reason for their lives, disappears during such an interference. The blood is produced within our bone caverns which serve as our skeletal structure. This is why shamans and others use the bones of their ancestors in their rituals. They believe that the memories of the dead ones are stored in the bones. This is actually quite correct, because the memories are stored in the blood, and the blood is created in our bones. When we align our consciousness and become more aware, we also automatically purify our blood, and our blood becomes something very, very sacred. The red blood cells are manufactured in the bone marrow, and when we realign the bone purifies the blood, and sorts out the inner secrets of identity. This is why bodywork changes the structure of our blood. What women have forgotten is that the blood is the source of their power, the Pleiadians say. The blood carries the genetic code, and because the Mother Goddess is the source of all things, this is where the code comes from. It is where the story is hidden. Menstrual blood can be used to nurture plant life, to mark earth, and to let Earth know that the goddess lives again. In general, women don't bleed into Earth anymore. Doing so is a direct transference of the energy of the goddess. They go on telling us that by letting the menstrual blood touch the Earth, women nurture her. Therefore, in a society where we spend most of our time inside, and we have clothes on, I think it may be a good idea to let some of the menses be spread out over the property to nurture Mother Earth. The Pleiadians relay a message to all women so that you understand that your menstrual blood is the source of your power and your deepest inner knowledge. In the bleeding process lie many of the keys to bringing the goddess back onto a planet, which is so energetically altered towards male dominance and negative power. Furthermore, we are told that if we are not interested in the goddess energy and the mysteries of the blood, we miss out on an integral part of life and will not understand what is really occurring on our planet. Men need to learn how to honor the blood, especially the pure menstrual blood, and women must do the same thing, and if these things turn us off, or we think it's not important, we are completely missing the point. The Pleiadians say that this is the most powerful teachings they can give us at this point to help us understand what is coming. They emphasize that we need to honor the goddess vibration that comes through our hearts and helps our hearts open. Menstrual blood is highly oxygenated, and the purest of all blood, and in humans, it carries the decoded DNA. The Pleiadians tell us it's the oxygen which decodes those strands and allows the restructuring of the data. I have been planning to post my paper about the moon and what has been found there, and also what effect this satellite has on life here on Earth, but haven't had the chance yet, but will probably be done eventually as an appendix to level 2, but that's something for the future. However, I stumble upon information about the moon everywhere. Even the Pleiadians in their material talk about that it is a construct, and that it highly affects we humans and all life on Earth, which is quite commonly known, and especially the menstruation cycles. The Pleiadians say the moon is a very powerful electromagnetic computer. As we know, men don't bleed. Therefore, the only way for men to, in an appropriate way, take into himself the power of blood is for a woman to gift him with her blood, to share her sacred elixir. It can be done through oral sex, or to eat fruit and vegetables which have been grown in the soil where a woman has spread her menses, or a man can be marked on the back of his neck or the solace of his feet with the blood from a woman. His body will absorb the knowledge. Unfortunately, having sex during menstruation has such a deep negative imprint in the human mind, that many people think it's repelling. If the reader, whether a man or a woman, enjoys having sex during the bleeding period, you have overcome a deep imprint. This is a very ancient ritual which stems from the time when the matriarchs were dominant on our planet, before the patriarchal Syrian regime took over. It was very powerful and kept the inhabitants in connection with the goddess. The men's equivalence to menstruation is the sperm. The sperm is the mother's goddess story encoded in the male vibration, and contains the interpretation of how the male remembers that story. And here is the interesting thing for us men: when we have sex with a woman during her period, our sperms can act as explorers and telepath back to us the power and knowledge of the woman. A man can, under these circumstances, get access to the woman's full identity. This is why it's so important that the partners are very honest with each other and don't mind sharing all the secrets with each other, because if the woman is willing to share her menses with a man during the sexual act, he will get access to her inner sanctum. And her inner sanctum is what? That's right, the heart of the Khaa. Lord Enki followed his mother's directions to a certain extent when he created Homo sapiens. He gave humankind the fire of the goddess, which is directly connected with the blood. He let the women bleed, and gave them some of the sexual knowledge, more than his step-brother Enlil was comfortable with, and the two had conflicts about this more than once. Enlil was afraid that human would be too goddess-like. And here we come to the point where we are going to reveal some ancient knowledge that was hidden from mankind by the Syrians a long time ago. It has directly to do with the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Like we already discussed, the tree of knowledge has to do with sacred sex, and the tree of life with blood. We know that blood is red, and sperm is white. These two, mixed together, is the key to longevity and eternal life. In the secret societies, this is well known, especially on the upper levels, and men, especially, who had, and still have, this knowledge, go crazy about mixing semen and blood and drink it. This is what Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard were involved in when practicing Aleister Crowley's Sex Magick of the 8th and 9th grade. It is supposed to give you a longer life, taking into account, of course, that you live relatively healthy otherwise. Neither Parsons, who blew himself up, nor Hubbard, who was either murdered or died from cancer, had particularly long lives, however. Parsons was very young when he died, and Hubbard was 75. This brings us right into the next subject, something that has been extremely misunderstood and has a lot of stigma to it. Conspiracy writers, more often so in earlier years than now, unless they are Christian, curse everything that has to do with mixing these fluids, when indeed it is something extremely important for us to understand and even practice. It's the negative, Syrian aspect of it that has given it the bad reputation. It was practiced in full in ancient times, when the goddess was still acknowledged and the divine feminine considered being the driving force in the universe. 4. Sex Magick and the War of the Genders Revisited. In his book, Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, David Icke describes the software program that is gender and sex. He talks about that it's a program within the hologram that is producing sexes and decides how you are supposed to behave when you take a male or female body, respectively. The hormones are also added by the program. This is true, ultimately. However, there are holograms within holograms, starting with the whole hologram, which is the entire universe. So holograms are not very exceptional, although the one we are mainly experiencing here on Earth is, just like Icke suggests, controlled by the reptilians, or rather the Syrian Alliance. However, this hologram is just a miniature hologram of the bigger one, keeping us in control here, but bodies and their hormones work the same here as elsewhere in the universe, if the species is sexually oriented. It's not that the reptilians from the lower fourth dimension are creating the gender hologram for us humans exceptionally. There are quite a few sexual races in the universe, who are not particularly in the same tight situation as we are. As long as we are human beings, sex is nothing wrong, whether it's a software program or not, it's a part of being human. There has been enough stigma put on this subject, we don't need more by saying that sex is a program, produced by an evil reptilian race. It's important to understand that sex actually brings us to the heavens. As we have seen now, it's basically both sex, female orgasm, mostly, and the blood of the female, mostly, which take us to the heavens, not just one or the other. Real sex magic is when two individuals have such a closeness with each other, and so much love, that they can blend into each other during the sexual act, after have put a goal for where the sexual energy should go. With a lot of training, it can literally take both you and your partner right into the KHAA in such a manner that you can blend in and stay there. This is your choice as a human being. You are basically from Orion, and you have the right to return there whenever you can, whenever you have figured out how to get there. You can also choose to stay here on Earth and learn more from this physical realm and become a guardian again, and only visit the KHAA when you wish to. Most humans are not used to mix our juices the way we discussed above, and I understand if it feels repelling. First of all, no one needs to go to the extreme and start drinking blood mixed with semen, there are other ways to reach the heavens. But I am mentioning this, because especially now, as long as we are still in the Syrian entrapment, it's an excellent way of breaking through to the KHAA and get strength, a lot of strength. I would suggest, however, that if you and your partner are very, very close and don't build up secrets and have withholds from each other, I would work on getting used to having sex both when the woman bleeds and when she doesn't. And if you're a woman, make very sure that the man you are sharing your blood with is someone you are very much in love with, because your menstrual blood is very sacred, and if you share it, the man will get to know your inner secrets. They are hidden inside the blood of the goddess. The same thing goes for other star beings which are sexually oriented. If the male is allowed to share the woman's blood, he will find out her inner secrets. This doesn't necessarily mean that the man can sit down and tell his lover afterwards all about her, but we're talking about knowing somebody instinctively, like in figuring someone out totally, if this makes sense. Is it so strange now if the Syrians, and other not-so-ethical males out there in the universe, have fought long and devastating wars to be able to get to the inner sanctuary of the female? And remember that both males and females out there in the universe have been equally bad. The universe is feminine, I am 100% convinced about this, and the energies of the universe are basically feminine. When the male energy was eventually created, the female was still the one who held the real power, because she was more one with the feminine energies and the Mother Goddess herself. So Mother Goddess divided herself into physical manifestations of herself, in order to have experiences in the universes she herself had created to begin with. These manifested goddesses split themselves into lesser goddesses, who started to reign in different parts of the universe. Some of these manifestations began to look at males as inferior and picked them as lovers, merely. Once they were done with them, they either ate them, killed them, or just got rid of them in one way or another, just to find someone else who could please them. The males, on the other hand, noticed the power that was within the female soul/mind/body complex and wanted to know how to achieve the same power, so they themselves could overcome their shortcomings. So, instead of the females treating the males badly, the males could gain female powers and treat the females as they wanted, if only they could figure them out. So, males out there in the universe kidnapped, tortured, and raped females to extract their power. They never succeeded to steal the real power of the female, but they learned how to gain some of it. So, they overthrew the queens where they could, and instead of having a matriarchal regime, they created a patriarchal regime that was even worse. The Syrians became the patriarchs personified, although there were other species out there, too, who stole the power from the divine feminine. Many of those species came together as one, and the Syrian alliance was created, a totally male-dominated federation. This alliance is now on a mission to take over as many universes as they can, but has lately mainly concentrated on invading the Khaa. They feel they have an axe to grind with the divine feminine, and want to create a male-dominated 100% universe. Moreover, they want to overthrow the Mother Goddess herself, in her form as pure energy, and make this energy masculine and more powerful than her. This is how it is in a very small nutshell. What I am trying to say here is that males and females have both done bad things towards each other and towards star races in general. Both sides of the coin, if we want to look at it from a viewpoint of separation, have been oppressive, because they have reigned in the extreme. Here on Earth, we should not be looking at overthrowing everything that has to do with the masculine or the feminine. We all are both masculine and feminine inside ourselves, and we need to find that balance. The last thing we need to do now is to overthrow the patriarchs and create a matriarchal regime again. That would be a horrible idea, and our conditions here on Earth would certainly not improve. We need a world where the feminine and the masculine are in balance, not only within ourselves but in relationship with each other and within society as a whole. Not until then can we have freedom. Love is the ultimate solution. We can see that everywhere that a real solution is coming up, love is the main ingredients in it. Love can overcome everything, but it has to start within ourselves. We can never ever love anybody else genuinely if we don't love ourselves first. So, everything comes back on self. This is why it's so important to raise our own frequencies. It is the other people's responsibility to raise theirs. But we inspire each other and we grow as a soul group, and eventually we grow out of the pettiness of gender wars, and any other wars as well for that matter. War is always a sign of a lower consciousness, yes, even when came to queens and kings of the stars, when they started fighting over which gender was above the other. We need to show the universe that humans are above that. And we are, once we're left alone. It may sound pretentious, perhaps, that we would be able to achieve something that the lesser queens and kings couldn't achieve. If so, think again, because this is exactly a part of what we were created for. It was programmed into our DNA to have as a goal to overcome such pettiness as war and conflict, whatever those may be about. That is part of the experiment, to be able to do some things that the gods and goddesses were not able to do. This is precisely why stern patriarchs like Prince Enlil and King Anu wanted to suppress the powers of mankind, especially the sexual powers and the power of the blood. They didn't want us to be more powerful than they are. I don't know how much Prince Ea actually cared about that. He seemed a little more liberal because he was an Aryan to begin with, and the son of the first manifestation of the mother goddess. He may have been less concerned about the humans being more powerful than the Syrians were. Ea was apparently more concerned about that humankind was too stupid to rule themselves, and therefore had to create certain bloodlines whom he put in charge over the rest of mankind, thus creating a ruling elite class with no middleman. Only an elite on top, and then the people as a slave race below them, to follow every command from the authorities. So, in summary, parts of how we can break our chains are through sex and our divine blood. These two things are very powerful, and when we practice sex magic routinely, we can be more powerful, and much stronger. Then, of course, we have the fire of the goddess, but part of that fire is in the blood. That doesn't mean that if our body dies, our fire will diminish, but it means that the body itself has the power of the goddess when powered up by the fire, and we are very powerful even in the physical, here in 3D. What we, as human beings, need to do is to explore the goddess. We have lived millennia after millennia, believing that God is a stern, quite aggressive, testosterone-driven male with long white hair and a long beard, and we've gotten pretty used to that. Now, when we learn that the opposite is true, we have a harder time. Nonetheless, we need to do this, it's essential to our survival in the future. If we ignore the goddess in our lives, we keep staying disconnected from the Prime Creator, because we don't understand her, and we don't understand we are her children, and therefore a part of her. This is also why I have a hard time with material such as the wing makers, and even LPGC. There is so much truth and wisdom in both these teachings, although the two are supposedly on the opposite side from each other, but none of the two embraces or acknowledges the goddess as the prime creator, or first source, if we use the wing maker's term. And as long as God is not acknowledged as feminine, the rest of the information is misleading, in spite of how much truth and value the information has otherwise. And don't think for a second that the wing makers or LPGC don't know about the female energy. They both do. The goddess is very loving and compassionate, and she cares more about your personal well-being than you may think. The pure goddess energy in this universe became very distorted at one time, and the females had a big part in it, but now it's time to restore balance. That's partly what we're here for. The war of the genders is still being fought in many places across the universe, and with all our goddess energy inside of us we are capable of creating the balance necessary, and if done properly, it will ripple out over cosmos and across the billions of galaxies and affect other beings on other planets, far away from Earth. We humans have these capabilities, and many good-hearted beings out there are waiting for us to finally graduate so we can help the goddess with this task, because she sees how beings in this universe, and beyond, suffer. It's a universe of free will, so suffering is allowed, it's just another experience, but after a while, when the lessons are all learned, it's time to move on. If the beings in the free will zone don't, there is one way the goddess apparently can intervene. She can create a new experiment, which can help her in her mission to accomplish a certain goal which will make less star beings suffer. We are part of such an experiment, hence we have so much of the goddess inside of us. However, the Syrian Alliance have not forgotten how males were treated in the far gone past, and they are still on their mission to destroy everything that has to do with the divine feminine. They don't understand that what happened had nothing to do with the mother goddess herself, nor had it anything to do with the queen of the stars. The suppression of the males was done by lesser goddesses, whom had since long forgotten the way of the mother. Once we really start to explore the goddess, we begin to value all life. When we value life, we don't overpopulate our planet, and we don't kill. This is why it's so important that I, or somebody else, explain what life is, what death is, what all species are, and the fact that everything is connected through the mother goddess. Even the Syrians. They may have disconnected themselves now, but by repenting and finding their way back, they still have a small chance to reconnect as well. The problem is that if they don't, this universe will fail, as I was talking about in level I, and will not be completed. Instead, it will deplete itself of energy, and float around in the void as a lifeless universe with dead galaxies, dead stars, and dead planets, totally depleted of life. It will become uninhabitable. And it has happened before with universes. For a universe to succeed, it must complete its goal, and everything in it must realize that it's all part of the same creation. We are all the creation of the Mother Goddess. Then, and first then, will a universe come full circle, implode, and start again in a new cycle. Speaking of overpopulation, we are currently 7 billion people, rubbing shoulders on this tiny globe, a little bit too many for everybody's comfort. However, we have already covered the main reasons why we have been allowed to reproduce to such a degree that we have reached this huge amount of people. I have also suggested that we have reached the peak of humanity. If our population grows beyond what we have now, it's not going to be with much. In contrary, the world population is going to decrease quite a bit in the future, even if there are no wars, illnesses, or mass extinction, man-made or not. Currently, the woman is basically fertile once a month, and her fertility is to a large degree dependent upon the moon, this artificial, electrical device in the sky. Just like the tide is a consequence of the moon pulling and pushing, so is the menstrual cycle. The moon has always been thought of as female, as goddess energy. This is correct in the sense that this is how it used to be. The moon was owned and controlled by Orion and the Queen of the Stars. The moon changed ownership as time went by, of course, and is no longer in the hands of the Orion Empire, but of the Syrian Alliance. So, the patriarchal regime took over the moon, just like they took over old Terra, Maldak, and Earth once upon a time. There is a totally different software program being run from the moon today than it was when the Aryans were in charge, and how humans react on things has a lot to do with the distance between the moon and Earth. Now, the menstrual cycle happens approximately once a month. This will change, however, and females will only be fertile once a year. This information was given to us already in 1994 by the Pleiadians, based upon their ability to read the planetary energies and the zodiac at that time, but they are still insisting that this will be the case. The way I see it is that the Syrians, who are in charge of the moon in the present, will be the ones who will move the moon into a new position, so the female body will be automatically programmed differently. This may very well be the solution to the overpopulation problem they have had with us humans for quite some time. We have heard horror stories that they want to reduce the world population to 500 million people, which is a drastic reduction. I would think that after the natural and man-made earth changes have done their part and wars and diseases have done another part, moving the moon will actually take care of the problem. Much more people will exit the planet than will be born, and things will reduce heavily and eventually level out. Whether it's going to level out at around 500 million people or not is hard to say, especially for me, who's not a mathematician, but there's going to be much less people on the planet. I would think the Syrians want a little more than 500 million on the planet, in order to establish their machine kingdom and create enough super soldiers to attack Orion, but it all remains to be seen. I can only speculate. The Pleiadians say, from the same book source, the Earth, that we will start seeing a reduction in population due to the change of the moon within 50 years, counted from 1994, when the book was written. 50 years in the future would then be around 2044. This means we are going to see women being less and less fertile. In the beginning, the doctors' offices are going to be overcrowded with women who can't get pregnant, until the medical field will start seeing a trend, unless the Syrians have already taken over totally at that time, and things will develop differently. Sperm banks, however, will be a flourishing business at least at first, but normally, mankind has adopted to new situations after a while, and will probably start accepting that our women are fertile only once a year. Besides, the male sperm is getting weaker and weaker as well, and cannot as easily produce offspring as they could before. We've seen more miscarriages the last few decades, and we need to remember that the males, as well as the females, are affected by the cycles of the moon. So perhaps we men will follow the same trend as women supposedly will? Either way, if the Syrians are in charge, and they want women to be fertile once a year, that's how it will be. 5. The new cosmic mind. We're now coming towards the end of the second level of learning, and it's time both to summarize our responsibilities and possibilities as human beings, and perhaps add a few things as well. If we don't have a multidimensional perspective on the situation we're in, it would look pretty depressing and there wouldn't be any obvious solutions. Fortunately, we have possibilities to see things from a much higher perspective than that of the third dimension, perhaps even a higher perspective than our prison guards as well. Anyone who is stuck in an idea, and act out of that idea only, is very limited in their perspective and their view of the universe. The Syrian Alliance are in that very narrow position, and therefore they can't see what's outside their limited worldview. Anger, hate, and revenge are emotions and thought patterns that are not going to bring them to higher consciousness. And as long as we humans go along for the ride, we are going down with them. There are probably a lot of people who wouldn't read a paper like this if their life depended on it, which it does. They basically don't want to know, it's too much responsibility. They don't care if the information includes the welfare of their children either, they just hope for the best. I know of people who have been asked, "Do you want to know what really happened at 9/11? And they answer, "No, I don't want to know. Maybe my children want to know in the future, but I really don't want to know." Our responsibility is not to try and talk these people into accepting the truth. It's out on the internet, and in books, for everyone to see. If there is a desire to know why people are literally treated like slaves, and why some races are treated worse than others, the information is there. It's not for us to judge, everybody has the right to choose their own paths, even if it is to move forwards with their blinders on. There were many souls who wanted to come here only for the nanosecond for several reasons. Some wanted to have fun, others saw an opportunity to learn something in 25 years what it may take a million years to learn otherwise. There were a lot more than 7 billion souls who wanted a body here, but Earth was full. Instead, these souls who didn't get a body are impatiently waiting for us down here to evolve so we can teach them something, and perhaps give them access to the living library. I am writing for those who are waking up. The ones who refuse we must leave to their own destiny, in spite of the fact that we know they can't look forward to a good future. They may think now that it's the easy way out, when in fact they are choosing the path with the toughest and hardest lessons, a path from which there may not be a return. They will be left in the hands of the Syrians. It's hard when we see our own children and friends choose what is obviously destructive, in spite of our efforts to teach them. Still, the journey is theirs. In their reality, the love of the machine is greater than the love of a fellow human. This is what the splitting of worlds is about. It's about to gain and let go. Both will happen to some degree to us all.